Your Voice, Shropshire Disability Network Newsletter, February 2012. Part 1. This did not set out to be a cuts issue of Your Voice, but the amount of material that has flooded in leaves little room for much else. It's all too important to leave out. Please do something with what you read. Write letters, send emails, whatever else you can think of. Don't just sit there and let evil prevail. Members of Telford Centre Rotary presented 2 cheques for £750 at their Burns Night celebration held at Madeley Court Hotel. SDN is one of the 2 charities that benefited from Rotary's great generosity. Fundraiser Ruby Hartshorn and committee chair Sonia Roberts are seen with the cheque. Ruby also won a bottle of scotch in the raffle, so one way and another she had a good evening out. The other charity was Life Straw, a system that makes contaminated water safe to drink economically and quickly. It is saving thousands of lives in the Third World. Destination unknown. We now have concrete figures on how much worse off the households in our study are in the 6 months since benefit reform started to be implemented. These losses range from £74.70 to a staggering £781.55 between April and October 2011. Some of the people we spoke to are now reporting that they have to choose between fuel and food. With each passing month, the financial resilience of the households in our study decreases, savings are wiped out, debts accumulate, and one-off emergency grants are used up. Just over a year ago, Destination Unknown explored how cuts to welfare and public spending would affect disabled people. It looked at how the cuts would affect 5 typical disabled families. Research showed that far from being protected from the worst of the cuts, disabled families faced dramatic reductions in their household incomes, totalling £9 billion. However, this initial research only told half the story. It did not include the implications of cuts to public services and local authority budgets. A sequel provides detail on the real consequences the cuts have for the everyday lives of disabled people, revealing the first-hand experiences of disabled families living on the edge of uncertainty, financial stress, and disability poverty. Demo says, we were able to paint a far richer picture of the circumstances in which these disabled households found themselves, and was struck by their financial vulnerability in their daily lives, and the oppressive sense of uncertainty that they had to live with, which clearly jeopardised their emotional well-being. Although nearly everyone faces tough times in this current economic climate, disabled people are hit particularly hard as a result of lower income, higher costs, fewer support services, and unpredictable health conditions. The case studies were a young disabled child, Aisha, cared for by her mother and father, a disabled man, Albert, and his wife, who cares for him and has moderate disabilities herself, a single disabled man, Philip, a single disabled woman, Carla, a middle-aged disabled man, Steve, who is a social care service user, a disabled mother, Helen, caring for her disabled child. Demos calculated how much income the 6 households have lost over 6 months. Aisha and her parents lost £199.52, Albert and his wife lost £781.55, Steve lost £618.77, Philip lost £74.70, Carla lost £140.10, and Helen and her son lost £238.82. These losses arose from a combination of lower than expected benefit increases and other more significant reforms. To take 2 examples, Albert and his wife have lost benefits as a result of their new pension income, which means overall they are worse off by around £33 a week, over 7% of their total income in 6 months. Steve's large loss arose because he now has to contribute nearly £25 per week towards his care, and he has lost the equivalent of almost 10% of his total income over 6 months. Demo says, perhaps the most significant development in this update report is the fact that Albert and his wife are soon to be evicted from their home, having fallen £13,000 into arrears since the government decreased the support for mortgage interest payments by linking them to the average mortgage rate, 3.63%, significantly lower than the previous SMI rate, which was based on the Bank of England base rate plus 1%. 6.08%, which left the couple with a £200 shortfall each month. Their situation demonstrates how disabled people are extremely vulnerable to the wider economic climate. Disabled people are more likely to be in such financially vulnerable situations because they have lower than average levels of savings and less access to affordable credit, as a result of being less likely to be in work or to have a sustained work history. 6 months on, the households in the study are still in a financially precarious situation, and we have seen Steve's modest level of savings wiped out. Other households accumulating more debt and one-off charitable grants being exhausted as there are now few avenues for emergency support available. This financial insecurity is compounded by fluctuations and deteriorations in the health of Albert and his wife, Aisha's mother Helen's son and Philip, who all report worsening health since we spoke to them in April, demonstrating how vulnerable disabled people can be to changes in their circumstance and ability to work. But alongside this, the effects of budget cuts in the wider environment are also making themselves felt. Carla may lose her freedom pass as the local authority scraps concessions for those with mental health needs, and says her benefits agency is closing because of lack of funding. Her local law office looks set to close. The charitable trust Albert relied on to pay his water bill last year says it cannot help with his water bill 2 years in a row, as it is inundated with claims for financial assistance. His local NHS trust has refused to provide him with a community psychiatric nurse through lack of funds and has told him to go to a charity instead. Aisha's family is experiencing increasing delays and difficulty in securing physiotherapy services and equipment. Aisha's been waiting for nearly 6 months for a standing frame, which was refused a motorised wheelchair by her local authority. Demo says that perhaps the most striking development in its update report is how several of the households have sought different sources of financial assistance when faced with a reduction of state support. Aisha's family has turned to a support scheme run by her father's employer and held a fundraising event in the community for Aisha's new wheelchair. Philip has borrowed from his brother and is being exceptionally frugal in order to pay off his debts. Steve, who has now used up his savings, says he will simply not buy things until he has more money or get a loan. Helen has resorted to using her son's trust fund to rent a suitable home. Demos is a think tank focused on power and politics. Its approach challenges the traditional ivory tower model of policymaking by giving a voice to people and communities and involving them closely in research. This article by Claudia Wood summarises the second stage of the groundbreaking work Destination Unknown. You can find out more about Demos at their website, www.demos.co.uk. These are just highlights from the article. Please read the whole thing. It is a really important piece of work. Review support saves mobility section of DLA from the axe. The government will now not cut the motability component of disability living allowance for those in residential care. Instead, it says, it will gather more evidence before deciding whether the same will apply under the planned personal independence payment, which is due to begin in April 2013. The recent Low Review, an independent review into how the mobility needs of the people living in state-funded residential care are met, came out strongly in favour of keeping the motability component. Its removal would lead to disabled people becoming increasingly isolated from their communities and family and being denied basic human rights, the review found. The weekly payments of either £19.55 or £51.40 continue to be paid whilst a claimant lives in residential care. All Care seasonal success. Thanks to a Christmas party, SDN is some £200 better off. The All Care company rounded off a fantastic year of support for SDN by making us the beneficiary of the office Christmas party, which was also open to others who wanted to buy a table. In addition to a profit of £80, guests left £115 in envelopes on the table. Maybe they were so generous because of a rousing talk given by Trevor Dickinson about the work of SDN. Our grateful thanks to all concerned. Ruby. In the ordinary way of things, we wouldn't run used car ads, so please don't send in details of your 1960 Mini, even if it only has had one careful owner who just drove to church on Sundays. This Kia was the car of SDN founder Jeff Forgy and has been adapted to meet his needs. Jeff's family have asked SDN if we could help them sell the wheelchair-accessible Kia, which many readers will have come to know well. Jess, Jeff's daughter, has put together some photos and information about the Kia, and if you're interested or know anyone who may be interested, please contact her via the contacts in this poster. It's a 2005 Kia Sedona LB05HNV, 71,000 miles and £5,000 or very nearest offer. Wheelchair vehicle, diesel, 2 owners, good condition and full service history. This is a wheelchair-accessible car, automatic, lowered floor, lightweight ramp, air conditioning, driver and passenger front airbags, electric windows, 5 months tax, power steering, CD player, alloy wheels, suitable for tall wheelchair passenger. You can contact Jess on 07980 153 871 or you can email sue.forgy@verint.com. Nerve fibres discovery may bring MS hope. A discovery that aging nerve fibres can be rejuvenated by young cells may have important implications for treating multiple sclerosis, scientists say. MS occurs when the immune system destroys myelin, the fatty insulating layer that protects nerve fibres in the brain and spinal cord. Early in the disease, the myelin can repair itself to some extent, but as the patient ages, this ability declines and nerve fibres are permanently destroyed. A new study on mice shows that the age-associated decline can be reversed. When old mice were exposed to immune cells taken from the blood of young mice, the myelin covering their spinal cord nerve fibres began to regenerate. The discovery could pave the way for new therapies for MS, according to the British and US scientists whose work is reported online in the journal Stem Cells. Professor Robin Franklin, director of the MS Society Cambridge Centre for Myelin Repair, said, "What we've shown in our study is that the age-associated decline in the remyelinization is reversible. For individuals with MS, this means that in theory, regenerative therapies will work." This has been taken from Yahoo News. $500,000 to lose out as DLA is reformed. 500,000 disabled people of working age will lose out on benefits through the government's reform to disability living allowance. That figure is included in a consultation document on assessment criteria and eligibility thresholds for personal independence payments, PIP, which is proposed as a replacement for DLA. By the year 2015 to 16, 500,000 fewer people will be receiving the benefit, even though the government has made some concessions on its original proposals in the face of huge outcry against its plans. These concessions include dropping plans to double the qualifying period for the benefit after the onset of disability from 3 to 6 months, dropping plans to remove Motability payments from 80,000 state-funded care home residents, revising the original assessment criteria following criticisms that the threshold for the benefit was too low. The government's plans threaten the ability of many disabled people to live independently, according to MENCAP. Disabled people, many of whom already live on the brink of poverty, should not be forced to cover the significant additional costs of their disability on their own, said David Congdon, the head of campaigns and policy at the mental health charity. It seems that those disabled people with lower level needs, but who nevertheless face extra costs associated with their disability, will lose out. For example, a person with a learning disability who lives independently but who needs some level of help each week with things like cooking, shopping and sorting their household bills may no longer be eligible for the benefit. Like DLA, PIP is designed to be split into 2 components, a daily living part equivalent to the care component of DLA and reflecting people's needs for assistance in supporting themselves, and a Motability component to support people to get around. There would be 2 rates for each component, a standard and enhanced rate, in contrast to DLA which has 3 care rates, lower, middle and higher. Under the proposed assessment, people with disabilities would be assessed on their ability to carry out 9 daily living activities, including preparing food and drink, bathing and grooming, communicating and engaging socially, and 2 mobility activities, moving around and planning and following a journey. Points would be awarded according to people's abilities to carry out tasks, with the count taken of how far they need prompting, support or aids to do so. This has been taken from www.communitycare.co.uk. DLA Video Diaries. The Guardian asked for short video submissions from people who receive disability living allowance to explain why it's important to them. Now a short film has been produced bringing together their voices and giving an insight into how DLA is a lifeline for people from a range of backgrounds and conditions. You can use this address to find it: www.guardian.co.uk/video/2012/Jan//17/living-allowance-video-diaries. Macmillan Directory. Macmillan Cancer Support's Directory of Information Materials for People Affected by Cancer is a single source of reference covering cancer in general, specific cancers, treatments, and living with cancer. It is arranged by cancer type, and detailed indices allow users to identify resources by title, subject, language, and format. It has details of 1,165 booklets and leaflets published in the UK in the last 5 years by a wide range of organisations, such as national cancer charities and support groups and government departments. You can go to b.macmillan.org.uk/be/S-205-information-resources. Screening cuts bowel cancer deaths. A bowel cancer screening programme in England is on course to cut deaths by a sixth, say researchers studying results from the first 1 million people tested. The study has been published online in the journal Gut. Some 16,000 people a year die from bowel cancer, making it the second only to lung cancer as a killer.